Tom Buckler.
And Carol Liddell.
Nice to meet you as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. On behalf of the Board of Education of the Wayne Westland Community Schools, I would like to welcome Dr. Mary Ann Sear to this interview for the position of Superintendent. Dr. Sear is currently Assistant Superintendent for the Taylor School District in Taylor, Michigan. Dr. Sear, I'd like to take just a few moments to describe our format this evening.
Certainly.
This interview may take up to 90 minutes. There will be 21 questions from the board. Toward the end of the interview, if time permits, we will give you an opportunity to ask questions of the board or to make a closing statement. Mr. Silveri, our search consultant, will keep us aware of the time remaining. Audience feedback may be submitted from those in attendance on the forms located back at the lectern. We will collect these forms at the end of the interview, and each member of the board will receive a copy. And although the task of choosing our next superintendent is the responsibility of the board, we value and consider input from our stakeholders in this process. So I will begin with an opening question. While we have had the opportunity to review your application materials, our audience has not. Please briefly review your background and share what causes you to be interested in this position at this point in your career.
Well, thank you. I'd love to. First and foremost, thank you for this opportunity. What an honor, and I'm flattered. In terms of my background, my educational background is such that I have a degree in Bachelor of Arts in English and Lettres Françaises is what it's called, which is French literature. I have a Bachelor of Education. I have a Master's of Education in Educational Organization, and I did those 3 degrees at the University of Ottawa in Ottawa, Canada. In order to go to the University of Ottawa, and I got a scholarship, you have to be able to pass the formal exams in both languages. So I'm completely bilingual in both French and English, obviously, and I'm certified as such. Long story, too long for tonight. Moved to Michigan. Thrilled that I did. I have a ed specialist in leadership and counseling from Eastern Michigan University, and I have a doctoral degree in educational leadership from the University of Toledo. So my formal training has certainly allowed me the opportunity to teach everything from pre-kindergarten to 13th grade in Canada, and have had that opportunity not only to teach but also to be an administrator at the elementary level and the secondary level. And I've also had an opportunity to teach at the university level. In the last 4 years, I found myself at the cabinet level as the assistant superintendent, and that has been quite an enjoyable opportunity and an eye-opener. It's like being a principal on steroids. So in terms of my personal life, blessed to have an amazing family, 2 fine young men off the payroll, which is fantastic, quite independent. And so when you ask me why I'm interested in Wayne Westland, I really believe that everything is about passion, timing, and fit. And so in terms of passion, I became an administrator at a very young age and have been on this journey for quite some time, and this is what lights me up. When I have an opportunity to help empower others, be it staff members or students, and see that kind of success, that to me is what it's all about. In terms of timing, I really am at a great spot in my life, and I'm always humble enough to know what I know and know what I don't know, and I really feel primed and ready for the superintendency. These 4 years at Taylor have certainly prepared me in every avenue. And in terms of fit, I've done quite the extensive research on Wayne Westland. It's a very impressive district. Very similar to Taylor in many ways, and we've done some exciting and amazing things in Taylor, and I would love the opportunity to do so in Wayne Westland.
Well, given what you know about the Wayne Westland Community School District, what would you say are our most immediate challenges? And also, what do you think 2 of our challenges we're going to need to address long-term?
Certainly. So as I did my research, and I looked at test scores, I looked at, I'm sure, some of the frustrations that you see, because we see them in Taylor as well. We have these really bright kids, and then why are these test scores the way that they are? And so we have done, I will share with you, when I part, I have a portfolio, and in the portfolio, you'll see a data protocol that we use. And within the data protocol, we're really at a spot where we are digging deep, rolling up our sleeves, and looking at how to address this. We've seen great growth. We use iReady and NWEA, and I see that you use NWEA. And not that everything is about test scores, but it certainly narrows in where we're at and what we need to do. So what we're learning is that we have really bright kids, very similar to Wayne Westland. Why are these scores the way they are? We believe, based on the data that we've done and the analysis that we've done, that it's a language issue. And it's about reading ability and exposure to vocabulary and truly understanding the test questions that they're being asked. And so we have an entire approach with an MTSS model where we're going to be able to expose kids to be best prepared. And not that we're teaching to the test, but we want to make sure that we prepare them so that they have all the ammunition to be successful. And so when we've looked at, we've done huge data digs, and you'll see that in the portfolio, where we've looked at where we stand across all of the Wayne Consortium. And so right now, we're fitting in a high growth but low proficiency area. So we're pleased with the growth, but we have to have these extended growth opportunities. And I would say I see the same thing when I look at the scores at Wayne Westland, because they're very similar to what we're experiencing in Taylor. So that would be one of the big focuses. The other focus is in my research with your district. I know that it's been a turbulent time and a difficult political time, and I believe it really is a time of healing. And so that's one of the things that I can certainly bring to the table. I'm certainly very empathetic. I'm a problem solver. One of the classes that I taught at the master's level was conflict resolution. And so I believe that the district has struggled with some political strife, and I'm certainly very well poised to be able to help be a healer in that area. I look at the issue of your student population, similar to Taylor. Where are all these students going? So one of the things that we just recently adopted 2 meetings ago, the board approved and adopted, was Munetrics. And not that I have a brother or a cousin who works for Munetrics. It's an amazing company that is a data hub. So one of the things that I loved, and there's a consortium price of $3 a student, that they'll tell you exactly where the kids went, why they went, and we now have ways to look at how we can get them back. So I would see that as being another issue in terms of student loss and how we go about getting the students back.
Thank you. How would you go about uniting all district stakeholders and getting everyone working collaboratively and cooperatively together? And please tell us how your background of experience would help you accomplish this successfully.
So philosophically, I certainly stand with a flattened leadership style. So although if I were awarded this position, I'm keenly aware that the superintendent is at the helm of the district. I believe that everyone's role is just as important. It's just a different kind of job. And don't misunderstand, I understand that at the superintendency level, there are going to be decisions that aren't going to be collaborative. But for the most part, when you pull people together and you build human capital and you're all working towards the same goal and pulling the rope in the same direction in the name of kids, you certainly see far greater results. And so it really is about pulling everyone together, listening to voice, listening to opposing voice. I think in my experience, when you really sit and listen to those who may have a different opinion than you do, there are 3 things that happen. You can say, wow, I didn't even consider that. We have to do that. Or, that's an interesting standpoint. I understand where you're coming from. Let me share where I'm coming from and where can we meet in the middle. And 5% of the time, there are times where you just have to say, I know it makes no sense, but for political reasons and reasons that I can't get into, you just have to understand that there's a reason behind the scenes that this has to be this way. So when you're transparent, when you have open communication, when you work together in the name of kids, and you really put children and students at the forefront of your work, and you have all stakeholders, and all means all. So you have board members, and you have administration, and you have teachers, and you have ancillary staff, and support staff, and community members, and parents, and everyone who has a vested interest in the district, in the community, and the students, and you give them a voice and an opportunity, great things can happen. But it has to be done systemically. So again, if you look at that data protocol, you think, okay, what are we trying to address? How are we going to do it? And then what's the timeline and the metrics in which we're going to see if we've been successful?
Thank you. I'm now going to recognize Vice President of the Board, Dr. Weaver, who has questions for you concerning district relations.
Good evening, Dr. Sear.
Hi.
Thank you for coming. Maintaining healthy relationships with school and community stakeholders is important to this board. Please share with us how you have gone about building and maintaining successful relationships with a diverse group of district stakeholders.
Absolutely. At a local level, I would say that I have strong relationships with our union leadership. So it's very important to make sure that there's ongoing conversations with each one of the leadership at the different bargaining units. It's also important to be visible. I'm in schools, I'm in classrooms, I'm down on the carpet, I'm reading with kids, I'm in a high school, I'm coding, I'm working with students. You have to be visible. And you have to have an open door policy to make sure that you can have those ongoing conversations when there are concerns. So you celebrate the joys, and you certainly keep an open mind when people have concerns and need to voice those concerns so that we can make improvements. At a community level, one of the things that I'm exceptionally proud of is a venture that we've gone into with SEMCA and Ford Next Generation Learning. So we embarked on this journey to pull our curriculum together in a wall-to-wall academies fashion. And Ford Next Generation Learning joined us, and their composite, they serve as a framework, and SEMCA is our convening organization. And what they do is they actually tie us together to businesses. And so when we go to the heart of who we are and what we're all about, what we want is we want to graduate kids, we want to give them an opportunity above and beyond everyone else, prepare them for their next stage in life. But then some of the things that we've done with Ford Next Generation Learning and SEMCA is that we've also made sure that they'll have industry certification opportunity, an opportunity for internship, and the business to have a voice in the curriculum, so that we are actually producing students that are going into their workforce or into their next stage prepared with their voice in terms of what they want from our students. Oftentimes what happens is that we graduate kids and they've got a business to run or they've got an organization, and the two paths never meet. And so this approach really has allowed us to have voice. So we have 4 micro units that are going on right now where the business partners have met with one teacher in each one of these academies. We have a business academy, a medical academy, a STEAM academy, and a fine arts academy. And so the business partner has come and met with the teacher to create a unit and just have voice. And you know, they're busy people, so we asked them to come in for 30 minutes and just talk about the unit and what do you want to see? What do you want to see in terms of soft skills? What do you want to see in terms of tangible skills in your industry? Then the teacher produces the unit. There's a talent tour for the students, so the students actually get a chance to go into the industry and see what it's all about. And that's great because some kids have these great ideas to think, that's what I want to be. And they get there and think, ooh, that is not at all what I want to be. And then we have an opportunity as a stretch goal to have teachers do externships within their organization over the summer. But most importantly, the students then take their talent tour, and the business players come in and they actually kind of do a roundtable or a presentation, and they get to share what it's like one day in the life of a physician, or one day in the life of a welder, one day in the life of a chef. And so they get to actually hear from the business person, and then the students put together a capstone experience. And then what we share with SEMCA and the business people is that they can choose the best capstone experience they want for their website, and we'll use the same for marketing purposes. The last piece I think that is important is to make sure that that parent engagement piece happens. And so we've done district-wide PTO roundtables where we have the PTO come in, and I've actually gone into schools and sat in on PTO meetings as well. Lastly, one of the things that I learned, we had a MDE audit most recently, and one of the things that we all need to work on is even further parent engagement. And so what we've learned is that given the socioeconomics of our district, oftentimes parents are working, and they're working 2 jobs to make ends meet. So we're looking at creative ways. If Muhammad won't go to the mountain, we're going to bring the mountain to Muhammad. And we're looking at ways to do Facebook Live, or we're looking for ways to do videos, and I see on your website you have quite a few very informational videos. So that whole piece about how do you reach out to parents if they can't be at the meeting, how do you extend that opportunity? And so I see that on your website, and that would be something that I would also love to enhance.
Okay, thank you. What are some examples of community activities for which you've provided leadership? And in what ways did they benefit the district?
So a few things. At a larger scale, we were invited to the Taylor State of the City, and we were invited to be able to, by the mayor, to be able to present the high school merger. We unfortunately had to close a high school, and so rather than turn it into a funeral, we turned it into a celebration and really touched on the wall-to-wall academies that I was talking about. And so we had the opportunity to share a portrait of a graduate that was made from the business. So we actually took business voice, took our school voice, and then brought it back through the state of the city. We had Congressman Dingle come in to share a presentation with the students about opiates. And so that's sort of at a larger scale. From a smaller scale, we do something called Taylor Extravaganza, where once a year we have every school and different business organizations, almost like a fair. So there are different tables, and the schools showcase their activities, and they can showcase anything that they would like. They can do a STEAM activity, they can do a read-in, they can do a math activity, whatever they feel that really speaks to who they are as a school. And we have our clubs and organizations that have tables, and then we have business folks that come in. So parents are going from table to table learning about all of the different schools, and then they can go and actually still feel part of the community. They can get their blood pressure done. They can meet the new dentist who's in town. And so it really is a community spirit to have a community feel, and at the same time showcase and market who we are. Lastly, at a very small level, I think it's just really important to be visible. So I can be seen at choir concerts and football games and basketball games, and just truly being an ambassador and not just sitting by the fence, but really getting out and meeting parents and having those conversations.
Thank you. How do you think various stakeholders, parents, community, and staff should be involved in our decision-making in the district and setting direction?
So in terms of strategic planning, and again, it really speaks to the philosophy that I shared about a flattened leadership and community involvement. And so every voice is important because everyone has a critical role, and everyone looks at a child through that lens. And so the bus driver's opinion is just as important as my opinion would be, as the parent's opinion, as the teacher's opinion, as the administrator's opinion. And the beauty is that we pull all of those ideas together, and then we get a finger on the pulse of what the community truly wants and needs. Because it can't be, if it's a top-down way of life, we're not going to be successful, and there's going to be dissension amongst the ranks. A strong community is really when you feel that you're part of something bigger than yourself, and that you've contributed in the name of children to make this really an amazing place.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Weaver. Dr. Sarah, I'm now going to recognize trustee Melindy Hines, who has some questions for you concerning political awareness. Ms. Hines?
Thanks for coming in, Dr. Siri. I'd like to ask a question, and I'll repeat it a couple of times because it is a little complicated. So, equity and excellence are two themes that come up frequently in discussions about K through 12 education. Do we need to make a choice between these issues, or can we do both? Please explain. And I'll repeat it one more time because it is a little difficult. Equity and excellence are two themes that come up frequently in discussions about K through 12 education. Do we need to make a choice between these issues, or can we do both?
Oh, we certainly can do both, and I think that they're parallel, actually, and one shouldn't exclude the other. If we look at the root of ESSA, certainly the law is such that we need to make sure that we provide an equal playing ground for all children, regardless of race, regardless of creed, regardless of special needs, regardless of abilities, regardless of zip code. It's important that we make sure that we create an equal playing field. We also have to set a very high standard, and we have to role model that high standard. So to think that they could be excluded or we have to choose one over the other, to me is just not even an option. And so if you were to ask folks that I've worked with over the years, they would say that that truly is probably one of my strong core tenets, is being just and fair and a champion for the underdog and ensuring that everyone truly gets a fair and equal opportunity.
Thank you. My next question, what are specific ways in which our district should be helping other local districts meet their student achievement goals? And I'll repeat. What are specific ways that our district should be helping other local districts meet their student achievement goals?
So, and you'll see in the portfolio that I'm going to share with you is all of the districts within the Wayne-Risa Consortium. You can see where folks are in terms of growth and in terms of proficiency, K-12. It shouldn't, although we do compete for students and, you know, that's how we get our fund balance. I also think that in the name of students that we should be working together. And again, that whole notion when we just talked about the importance of community and having voice, I also think it's just as important to pull communities together, to work together so that we can share resources, so that we can share ideas, so that we can share programs, we can share students. There are ways to go about this that you could still safeguard your budget, safeguard your community, safeguard your students and retain your students, but serve the community at large. Wayne-Risa really is a very powerful organization, and we should use that to the utmost of our ability. And they have opportunities that lend themselves to that in terms of, just for example, the curriculum directors meeting that I attend monthly. There's huge collaboration amongst the curriculum directors that serve in the similar situation that I do. And there's very rich and powerful discussions. So we learn from each other and we share all the time. So.
Thank you. Last question. What impact do you feel that Every Student Succeeds Act is having on Michigan school districts?
Say that for me again, please.
Yes. What impact do you feel that Every Student Succeeds Act is having on Michigan school districts?
So I think we have to root our work in ESSA. And so at a systemic level and at a policy level, when you look at your board policy and we look at our systems, those have to be at the base of what we do. And so when we look at our curriculum, for example, is it equitable? Does the language in the curriculum speak to all needs? Do our assessments speak to the needs of all students? So we have to look at curriculum, we have to look at instruction, we have to look at cultural sensitivity and awareness in terms of the professional development that we offer for our staff, and not just our teaching staff, but the entire staff. And so that would be paramount in terms of how that does impact all of our students. And it's not just only not a shame, but it's illegal to not address it in that way.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. My pleasure.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. Dr. Sear, I'm now going to recognize our board treasurer, Tom Buckaloo, who has questions for you concerning finances. Mr. Buckaloo.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Could you describe your experience with budget development and financial management? And then also at the same time include some difficult budget cuts that you've had to make?
Absolutely. This is my 4th year in Taylor. When I first arrived in Taylor, the cabinet was faced with a negative $4.5 million deficit. And we were concerned that there was a possibility that we would be taken over by the state. And so, you know, you roll your sleeves up and you really have to do a needs assessment of everything in the district. And so, knock on wood, with some lean management and some creative marketing and some enticing programs, you know, we were able to recruit some students back. We had to make some layoffs, and thank God we did many of them through attrition. But there were some hard decisions and some hard conversations that caused some angst within the discussions of the bargaining unit. But you have to go back to why are you making this decision, and who is at the heart of the decisions that we're making? And so with some very hard work, some lean management, some strong conversations with all of the bargaining units and all of the contract negotiations, we are now 5% in the black, which we're quite proud of. So that happened with lots of blood, sweat, and tears. That happened with some challenges, but we are there. At a district level, it's about a $60 million budget. When we look at title budgets, our title budget alone, we have a very strong title budget with Title I, Title II, Title III, 31A, Title IV. We have about $6 million. And so it's also very important to sort of get the best bang for your buck. And we have to treat our general budget and our title budget as if it were our own. So although I'm known for being very creative and coming up with some interesting programs, I'm also known for ensuring that we are making the best financial decisions and that we're getting the best bang for our buck when we're making these purchases, whether they be programs or whether they be for supplemental materials or whether it be for curriculum. It's just important that we make sure that we're fiscally minded to make sure that we're solvent.
Thank you. A second question. What opportunities do you believe budget limitations present? And in tough financial times, what are your top 3 priorities?
I just want to make sure I have the question correct. So could you repeat it for me one more time?
It's what you thought it was. What opportunities do you believe budget limitations present?
So we can't be pie in the sky, and we can't, there's not a money tree. I looked. There was not a money tree when I first came in. So we need to be fiscally prudent. But we need to make sure that we're not making cuts at the student level in the beginning of any kind of cuts that need to be made. Try to preserve as many programs and try to preserve everything that we can for students. That should be at the forefront. There are always ways to be creative in the portfolio that I'm going to share with you over the last 3 years. Just in terms of competitive grants, there's about $600,000 that my immediate team and I have come up with above and beyond the regular budget. And so there's an opportunity to be able to go and be competitive in terms of grants. The challenge is really multifaceted. And so when you're looking at your budget and you're looking at opportunities, we have to figure out how to retain our kids. We have to figure out how to retain our teachers. There's a huge teacher shortage and a crisis that we need to make sure we know is real. We need to make sure that there's a needs analysis throughout the district at every level and in every bargaining unit. And so I would say that, again, that's not a top-down decision, that should be a collective situation to work closely with bargaining units, because the biggest expenditure is manpower, as we know. So we have to figure out the best way to ensure that we take care of our own, but that we do so in the name of students.
Thank you. One final question. What ideas might you explore to obtain additional revenue for the district? Have you had success in obtaining additional funds for your district, and if so, how?
So I mentioned the competitive grants, and that's about $600,000. And every penny counts, and so we have many business partners. For example, one of the schools, and this is just at a small level, but when you think small, every penny counts, every contribution counts. We needed a sensory room. We took on the Act 18 program in our district with our ASD students, and so we needed a sensory room. And one of the local pizza proprietors was keen on making sure that he took care of us, and so you should see this state-of-the-art sensory room that he just wanted to take care of his community and take care of his school and his community. And so there are ways to make sure, if you are, particularly at the superintendent level, it's important that you're well connected in the community, because there are very benevolent people that want to make sure that they take care of the schools in their community. At a larger level, certainly, a bond is a gift. And that doesn't come easily either. So again, that's about relationships. It's about community involvement. It's about staying connected with city council and the mayor and business partners and your constituents. So certainly, that's something to pursue as well. And I would just say making sure that there's a close eye on the budget at all times.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ruckaloo. Dr. Sear, the next three questions will be on the topic of instruction and curriculum, asked by Mrs. Madell.
Good evening, and thank you for applying and coming here this evening.
My pleasure.
Is it okay if I call you Mary Ann?
Please do. I was going to ask that you did.
And I'm Carol.
Perfect. Perfect.
And also to let you know, I am an educator.
Wonderful.
So, you know, I'm going to need you to dig a little deeper in some of your answers tonight. What experience and success have you had with closing the achievement gap based on economic opportunities and other demographic factors?
So one of the things that I stumbled upon when I came to Taylor was that there were many great programs that were in Taylor, but they weren't aligned. And so you'd see pockets of, you know, and I got a tour. I saw Harvey and Goodvis kits, and I saw LLI kits, and I saw different programs that were throughout schools, but nobody was doing the same curriculum. So when I first arrived, it was important to pull a team together, and we did some pilot programming, and we started with language arts, because when we look at our test scores, that's clearly where we needed to start. And so now, after a pilot, and we used Lucy Calkins, and we did Journeys. And we ran the pilot for 6 months, and we did that pilot K-5. And so one of the things that I loved about Journeys, and the teachers were the ones that chose, they rolled up their sleeves, and they were the ones that ran the pilot. Lucy Calkins is a guru, but one of the things that I loved about Journeys was that the whole curriculum comes on a pallet. And so I can remember as a principal, when my email would ding, and I would think, what is going on? And it's a teacher looking for a mentor text, and they don't have that in their library. And so they're spending all this time trying to find the materials that they need to teach, which then takes away from their teaching, and it stresses them out, and then they're not happy that they don't have the things that they need to be able to take care of kids and teach them. So we ended up going with Journeys, and it really does talk about all of the needs in content standards for English language arts. And so it's strong in vocabulary, it's strong in phonics, it's strong in classic literature. It has a huge comprehension component. And most importantly, it comes with a comprehensive library. So these teachers felt like it was Christmas because the Costco palette showed up in front of, I mean, we took over a whole gym to be able to fill these classrooms. And so the teachers were thrilled. And that's the kind of thing that lights me up, because then teachers have the tools that they need to be able to meet the needs of students. So Journeys is the first part of Houghton Mifflin's curriculum, and then Collections is what is taught 612. And so currently now we are aligned in English language arts, grades pre-K, because we have a Young Fives program in Houghton Mifflin, Journeys, Collections 612. So Journeys is K-5, and then Collections is 612. So our next venture is now to do so in math. And that's Algebra 2, as you know, is everybody's bane of existence. And so we are working on sort of a backwards design, and where are we missing these foundational pieces in our curriculum, and then how do we make sure that we align that K-12. And so that's our next venture, and that would be from a curriculum stance. The other piece that I'm proud that we put in place, there were no normed metrics. And so we chose to do iReady, K-8, and then NWEA 912. And I know that Wayne Westland does NWEA. And so I like iReady K-8 because it offers an instructional opportunity. So you can purchase the instruction and intervention opportunity for kids. So when they do their tests 3 times a year, another piece for teachers in an MTSS model is to make sure that they have the tools to do the interventions. So when we do our professional development with teachers, regardless of what they're teaching and regardless of the age that they're teaching, we really espouse a workshop model. And so workshop means something different to many people. So just for the sake of sharing, it's a mini lesson. And you usually do the mini lesson based on the number of years a child is. So in kindergarten, a mini lesson might be 5 or 6 minutes. At the high school, the mini lesson might be 15 or 20 minutes. Then there's an activity portion of the period where the students from the lesson get to try on what they've learned. And then the piece that we strive for, that we are actually insistent on, is that there's that metacognitive piece where we come back together and we actually talk about our learning. And so in that middle portion, when there's the activity time, we really train teachers to be able to, in an MTSS fashion, make sure that they have organized groups to be able to close the achievement gap, meeting the needs of those kids that are struggling. And so while the activity time goes on, there may be different students in small groups or working individually, or there might be a teacher that's doing an intervention with 2 or 3 students. If you're lucky enough to have manpower in your room, and you have an interventionist or you have a para, then it's all hands on deck during that activity time. And so we really use iReady or NWEA, and we make sure that we use our time wisely and that every minute counts to be able to close that achievement gap. That is something that's difficult to achieve at the high school. And so what I'm really proud of that we've done to make sure that we look at an MTSS model and close that gap is that we have organized our master schedule in such a way where we are sharing students. So all of and it fits part and parcel with the wall-to-wall academy that I was talking about. And so we're preparing our teachers to be able to work together to serve a small number of students. So we have 7 teams, for example, at the high school. And so a team meets during a planning hour. And so this team, and we have about 80% purity. And so this team shares a group of students. And so then if Johnny's not doing well in math, but has a great relationship with the English teacher, and Johnny's got 18 missing assignments, but boy, oh boy, is passing math, the math and the English teacher get together and they meet with the parent or they meet with Johnny to be able to figure out, hey, what's going on? How can we help you? How can we serve your needs? So it really is an overall comprehensive approach. It's important to make sure that your curriculum is aligned. It's very important to make sure that you have the appropriate assessments, and not just normed assessments, but teacher assessments are also critical because there's no greater person who knows students best than the person who's in front of them every day. So those running records from an anecdotal standpoint are critical. And then that whole MTSS and engagement piece to make sure that students are meeting those needs would be the 3 components that I think are absolutely essential.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Please give us examples of educational change or reform you have initiated in your current or previous district in your position. What have led to improvements in student learning? Let me repeat that. That came out poorly. Please give us examples of educational change or reforms you have initiated in your current or previous positions that have led to improvements in student learning.
So I'm going to focus on previous and current, if I may, because it speaks to the same topic. And so that really would be about interdisciplinary teaching. And so in my previous district, we became an international baccalaureate school. And essentially, just to share, an international baccalaureate school is a school that has 6 essential themes. And then you organize your entire curriculum around these themes. And so the themes are universal, and so the same themes hold true for kindergarten as they do for 6th grade in the PYP program. And so the beauty of all of that was that teachers got together, we looked at the content standards, we looked at our units of study, and then we actually found interdisciplinary ways to teach kids. And so what we found was that kids would just be so lit up. As the principal, when I walked in, I wasn't quite sure if they were teaching English language arts, or they were teaching science, or they were teaching social studies. It was clear that when they were teaching math is a tougher one to integrate. But when they were doing a unit of study, the kids were engaged. They were putting on plays. They were creating things. They were doing project-based learning. And when you watch them be so engaged in what they were learning, and they would be talking about it at recess and be talking about it at lunch, and so proud, and parents would want to come in and watch the final presentations, you knew, just from their experience, that this was the best way to teach. And then when you actually saw their scores, because once they're engaged, their scores immediately improved. So now fast forward in Taylor, we're seeing the same things when we're talking about this wall-to-wall academy and the micro units that I talked about with business partnerships and the engagement, and students are keen when they're thinking about college and career readiness and their next step. And so now they're actually having conversation with business partners, and it's connecting the dots. So then the stretch goal after we do these micro units is then to take the elective teachers and the core teachers. And so when you're teaching English, for example, you may connect with the elective teacher, and in your unit of study, you would make sure that what you're teaching in English was a sprinkling of what's going on in the academy within this elective class. So now the kids are connecting the dots, and they're seeing the big picture thinking about how it all makes sense when you connect all of these different classes and different opportunities in a thematic or a project-based way. And so I would say that certainly has shown great excitement in teaching and learning. And then how we have supported all of that is through the coaching model, and I say that was probably the other piece of the reform. Certainly something that I helped institute in my previous district and then instituted here. And it has been exceptionally successful. Actually, we had Westland coaches come and sit in on some of our professional development because Wayne Reese touts Taylor as having the model coaching model. So they often send people to come to we have PD for our coaches once a month. And essentially the coaching model is such that it supports one coach, instructional coach, in each one of the buildings. So we have 12 buildings, and so there's a coach in each one of the buildings. And here's the non-negotiable. The non-negotiable, it's that loose-tight model, sort of 80-20. And the non-negotiable is that a coach and the principal will choose 4 teachers a year. And so you think it's not a fix-it model, it's a how do we build human capital model. And so the principal and the coach look at the 4, when we first started, you take your 4 top teachers in your first year. And top doesn't necessarily mean I have the best test scores. It means, do you have good and strong relationships with your colleagues? Do you have good and strong relationship with kids? Do you connect with kids? And you have to find people that have a sphere of influence so that it'll fractal out. And so the non-negotiable is that the coach and the coachee will meet 3 times during the week. They'll meet to plan, they'll meet to teach, and then they'll meet to debrief. And so in the planning, they look at their unit of study and they just sort of flesh out how and what they're going to teach. In the actual teaching piece, it can look different ways. It can be that the teacher teaches and the coach watches. It can be that the coach models and the teacher watches, or it can be that they co-teach. And then the most critical piece is that debriefing piece, because once they've finished that opportunity of teaching, they actually look at, what did the kids learn today? Where were they? Who struggled? Who thrived? Do we need to reteach for the next day? And so those 4 teachers are coached all year round. And what happens is now we're into year 3, so now they become experts on the staff. So now the next year you go in and you choose 4 new teachers, but you have these 4 teachers who have already been coached. And the amazing thing, and it happened in my previous district and it's happening now, where now these teachers are getting together and you go to look for them and you think, where did they go? And they're on their planning period, but now they're planning together. So you've got a coach and a teacher who's already been coached, and now a new teacher who's being coached. So it really is a fractaling out. And so now what we're seeing is that the feedback from teachers are saying that they feel safe, they feel respected, they feel trusted, because it's in a non-evaluative way. So another non-negotiable for the coach is that none of what they do has any bearing on the teacher evaluation piece. That is totally separate from that opportunity with the principal. But teachers really feel valued, and I know we have put a ton of technology into our district, and I think that's one of the safeguards, is that we've ensured that our coaches were trained through the Michigan Department of Education in the MDE Coaching 101, and then we do our own training monthly, as I mentioned. But we also make sure that they're trained in terms of technology. So there's nothing worse, teacher to teacher, as you know, no matter how savvy you are and no matter how good a teacher you are, inevitably the technology is going to break down and you think, you have got to be kidding me. I've got the best lesson and this won't start. So the beauty about a coach is that the coach can come in, the teacher can keep teaching, the coach goes and fixes the clever board or fixes whatever needs to be fixed. There's no stress, and there's just this real partnership. Because when you look at a coach's schedule in that plan, teach, debrief, and you take 4 teachers and you actually plot out their calendar, the rest of the time, the coach is then available to the rest of the staff to be able to support them in just the ways that I talked about. So oftentimes there's a 911 like, okay, I can't get this to start, and this is a really great lesson. Coach goes in, teacher's got the kids, makes fire, magic appears, clever touch board works, and then and there seems to be less stress. So there have been some, in terms of reform and in terms of how we're doing our business in a different way. It's certainly been very beneficial to kids, but it's also been very beneficial for teachers.
Thank you. I'm starting to have flashbacks.
And you didn't have anybody to come and make fire for you, did you?
No, but my kids got to know what the Exorcist movie looked like.
Right, exactly,
Me
exactly.
and a whiteboard?
No.
Sorry, I diverted. Last question. How would you meet the needs of college readiness while also providing high-quality, relevant, skilled trades and career-focused opportunities for the students?
So I think I not to sound redundant, but I did mention that about our work with for Next Generation Learning, SEMCA, and our work rooted in our Career Center. And oh my goodness, I'm proud of our Career Center. I'm really impressed with your Career Center. So it's really important that we look at, first of all, where we're at in terms of opportunities for our kids with high wage, high demand careers, and make sure that we're giving them those opportunities in all facets. And there's been a huge shift. There used to be a stigma about, you had to go to college, you had to go to a 4-year institution, and so you can start at a 2-year institution, but you have to go to a 4-year institution. And I think we really, when we go back to the question about equal opportunity, we really discounted a lot of talent from students who have great talents, but not necessarily in that vein. So it's really important that we meet the needs of all kids. And so in terms of college and career readiness, it means everyone for their next stage of life. And so whether it be from an early college opportunity, which is something that I know that you have partnerships, and as do we, those are great opportunities in terms of preparedness. The CTE programs are another huge piece. We also have to set high standards and ensure that we put rigor in place to prepare our students, because the feedback that we're getting with some of our students that leave us is that they go and they tank. So why are they tanking when they leave us? So we have to look at that harsh and difficult to swallow data to figure out what is it that we're doing. So we need to make sure that we have relevance, that we have rigor, and that we have opportunity. So when we look at this wall-to-wall academy, that's one of the things that excites me, is that we use career cruising. And so kids actually do a sort of an inventory of where their interests are. And again, they're young, and so these are just directions. It's not a life sentence, but it certainly gives them a path. And then within that wall-to-wall academy, with the academy that they choose, they're in a pathway, and they either get to be really lit up because this is what they love to do, or they say, not so much. One example, when we went, because we've really done our due diligence and our research, and we've been to Clearwater, Florida, and we've been to Nashville to go and study the best models. And so my thing, when we first went to a model schools conference in Nashville, it's really one thing to hear people go and speak at a conference. And so I was bold, and I said to the speaker, who was the principal at the Clearwater High School, I said, I'd love to bring a team to actually come and talk to your teachers and see your kids in action and walk the hallways and see what it's like. And so this stays with me forever. So and the students were amazing, because they're working with teachers who are working in the same vein to help them into their direction. And so this young man, 17 years old, was in the health academy, and he was taking paramedic class. And so I said, so you're going to be a paramedic? And he said, I'm going to tell you, I'm not. He said, that's not where I'm headed, but I don't have regrets. Here's what I learned. He said, I'm actually headed into business. I had an opportunity for an internship over the summer, and that's where I'm headed. He said, but in all of this training, I've learned how to manage my stress. I've learned how to be a team player. I've learned how to act under challenging times. I've learned to be empathetic. I've learned to look at people like, if I'm going to care for them, that's my mother, or that's my sister, or that's my brother. So the skills that, when you really focus in on this opportunity in this wall-to-wall way, really gives kids a different lens to be prepared as we set them off into their next venture.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Medill. Dr. Sear, I'm now going to recognize Mrs. Walker, who is going to ask you questions concerning the attributes of leadership. Mrs. Walker?
Good evening, Dr. Sear. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you.
So my first question is, what is the most difficult situation you have had to deal with in your educational career, and how was it resolved?
Yeah, I've thought long and hard about this. And, you know, I've certainly dealt with grief and death on staffs and with children. High school closing and closing of some elementaries in my previous district has also been like a funeral. But I think the most poignant thing that I've had to deal with was, in my previous district, I was the vice president of the bargaining unit for principals. And one of my colleagues was in our bargaining unit, and she was struggling. And she was at a high school level and at a principal level and making some choices that were challenging. And so, you know, on the one hand, she's a colleague and a friend, and on the other hand, I have a responsibility to the district and to our students. So we had to make sure that we supported her and helped her make some different choices, make some different career moves. We had to make sure that she was taken care of in terms of adhering to years of service. But we had to make sure that we were taking care of the district and taking care of the students, because she was just not in a way to be able to continue to do so in that capacity. And so it was tough to be able to make sure that she was well represented and well taken care of. But at the heart of every decision is that we have to behave in the name of what's best for kids. And that truly was what was in the best interest of students. So we had to help her see the bigger picture. And that was a challenge. That was a challenge because it was not the outcome that she would have wanted, but it was the right thing to do. And in the end, it's interesting, years later, is very appreciative and very grateful and very thankful. But that was quite a challenge to be torn between a dear friend and colleague and what's right for kids and what's right for the district.
Thank you. My second question for you is, what is the key elements needed to establish and maintain a healthy and highly effective relationship between you and our board?
Communication, and then after that, communication. Transparency. Certainly knowing my role, and that I answer to the board. That we look at policy and I make recommendations, and the board has their role in governance, and that I am very respectful of those roles and certainly would never overstep, certainly not deliberately. I would hope that the opportunity would present itself, that there would be a rich relationship where if there were missteps or mishaps, that we would have an opportunity to have those conversations, even if they are difficult or challenging conversations, because ultimately, again, I come back to that whole piece about who do we serve and why do we do what we do. And so I certainly recognize that all of you have been voted in by your constituents and that you are the voice of the community. And so you would trust me to be the ambassador, to be able to perpetuate your voice and your wishes collectively in the name of serving students. And so it really would be about making sure that we adhere to all policy, make sure that we look at all of the important tenets in a district, and that we have rich and open discussion to continue to meet the needs of students in all of those areas, be it governance, be it policy, be it student achievement, operations, parent engagement, human capital. How do we build on all of that? And so we would work very closely together to make that happen.
Thank you. And my final question is, given your research of our district, what do you believe our vision for the future should be? And how might you inspire and engage the entire district in pursuit of that vision?
So I think I go back to, I hold a strong vision about this idea of students, teachers coming together in the name of students. And so when I look at all of the rich opportunities that I have discovered that your district holds in terms from curriculum to your career center to your preschool. I mean, there's just so many rich opportunities. I would love to see a vision similar to what I lived in my previous district with that whole IB model. And it doesn't have to be a model per se, but really about taking curriculum, helping teachers help kids connect the dots and truly have meaningful learning that takes them into their next journey and creates higher order thinkers and citizens that are ready to be able to take care of us, because those are the people that are going to be taking care of us, and they're our future. And so that would be my vision, would be to pull people together in the name of projects and opportunities so that kids can demonstrate their learning in big ideas and project-based opportunities.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. Walker. Dr. Sear, I'm now going to give the floor to Secretary Mark Neal, who has questions for you concerning staff and personnel.
Certainly.
Thank you, President Cox. And welcome.
Thank you.
Doctor.
Thank you.
My first question is, please describe your most successful experience in building a high-performing work team.
So I would have to go back to the coaching model, if I may, not to sound redundant, but they have really changed the teaching and learning of our district. But we don't just stop there, because it really is, and you'll see that in the portfolio that I share. I shared a PowerPoint presentation on the whole coaching model. And so you keep the students at the heart of it. And then what's important is that instructional leadership is probably the biggest challenge that I think that education faces. And so back in the day, when I became a principal, you shook hands and you kissed babies and went to PTO meetings and you made sure everybody was okay. And that has changed exponentially. And so the demands to be an instructional leader are monumental. And so then it's bestowed upon us to make sure that we offer professional development in that vein. So when we talk about really making a shift, so there are the coaches, but there's another layer of that includes the principals. And so some of the feedback from principals is that they really have gone from being managers 4 years ago to truly instructional leaders. And that's not because I'm a brainiac, it's because we put the right tools, the right opportunities, and the right platform to have those rich conversations. So that's the next layers with the teachers and the principals to have those rich conversations in terms of data digs, in terms of looking at needs. Then there's a layer that includes, next to the coaches, we have a school improvement leadership team. And so we have 4 school improvement coordinators and a director of state and federal programs. And so that's the next layer. And so there really is no hierarchy. We all work together. And so we espouse that whole idea of flattened leadership. So it is a cabinet level. It's central office with school improvement leadership. Then we have the principal and the teachers and the coaches that all work together to meet the needs of kids. And that was not an easy lift, because when we first made those suggestions, again, much like the curriculum that I stumbled upon where there was no alignment, buildings had their budgets and they were their title budgets, and a lot of what we do in this vein with professional development is all through our title funds. And we're fortunate enough that we get a substantial amount of money and we use it very wisely. But there was some real pushback. And so, you wait for that tipping point, because when you first share that idea, there's 20 or 30% that think, oh, that can work. And then you just keep educating and you keep having conversation and you keep showing opportunity. And then you have that 40% that think, oh, this is really impressive. And then when you get to that tipping point when you're at the 70%, you can move forward. But before we got to that point, people were scared about their money being taken away. You're going to take my money. Well, hang on. It's your money and it's going back into your school, but with very systemic manpower. And so the feedback is such, and that's one of the things, you always hope that you leave a legacy. And so if I'm awarded this amazing opportunity, that would be hopefully one of the legacies that stay, and it's so deeply rooted now and so successful that there have been many principals, the naysayers are like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I can't believe that I was so against this. Please don't ever take my coach. Please don't ever take my coach. And so I would say that would probably be the thing that was most revolutionary in my experience.
Thank you. So how would the president of your teachers union describe you?
She would say that, and we just had this conversation because she actually called me before I came and wished me well. She would say that I am an absolute proponent for kids. She would say that I have brought things to Taylor that Taylor's not seen in the last 20 years. She would also say that I'm fair. She would say that I hold high standards. There are times, clearly, from her role and my role, where we might not see eye to eye. But what I respect about her greatly is that the two of us can come back together and either agree to disagree, or we kiss and make up and move forward. But I would say that when we sit down, again, there's that whole three things happen. She'll share an idea and I'll be like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that. You're absolutely right. Or hang on. I see your point. Here's my stance or our stance in terms of a district stance. Where can we find the sweet spot or the happy medium? And there's that time, the 10%, 5% of the time where I say, listen, I can't get into it. You know I can't get into it for a whole host of reasons. It just has to be this way. And they're political and they're community oriented and it's policy driven. It just is the way that it has to be. But she would say that she and I have a very, very strong working relationship and knows that I believe in kids and that I believe in teachers and that we need to make sure that we support teachers. And every role in the district is important, but we have to take care of our teachers. They're one of our strongest commodities. And I think that as a state, we, in a community and a consortium, we have to look at the teacher shortage. It's a crisis. So it's important that we make sure that we support our teachers and that we take care of them and put the right tools in place so that they can be successful.
All right. And lastly, what would you suggest in terms of a comprehensive professional development plan for our educators? And specifically, what would be the key priority area as well as delivery system?
And I hate to be redundant, but I'm going to talk about the coaching model again because it's embedded PD. And so unlike a conference, and there's nothing wrong with conferences, and I attend conferences to make sure that I stay current, and it's important to go and see the star from afar and see what is out there beyond our doors. But then it's equally as important to make sure that we bring that learning home and that we share that with those that we work with every day. And so the coaching model really does lend itself to that. When I look at one of the schools who has just soared and they've created something called Win Time, and this was all on their own initiative, and so we put the pieces in place, and so it's called What I Need. And so they've taken their iReady data, they've taken 3 teachers within a middle to upper grade level, and they've divided the kids based on their test scores, so the grade that they're in is not as important as where they are academically. And so we have kids, so it's 10 o'clock, okay, we've got an hour of win time. They've strategically placed students, and the kids just transition on their own based on their needs. So they go to these small group learnings with the teacher who may be the second grade teacher, but is a rock star, but with place value. And so these kids get up and they're working with that particular teacher. And so then you maximize your manpower. So there are LLI interventionists, and then we have our teachers that are in there, and the special education teacher pushes in. So now you may have 5 or 6 educators that are all working in this 1 hour confine. So you have kids that may need some real extra support, but you also have those kids that need that enhancement because they're at grade level or above grade level, and so we're trying to meet all of those needs. And they came up with that based on this coaching model, and then the room to be able to grow. So again, it's that loose tight model where you have some non-negotiables and some systems and some frameworks in place, but then you trust that people are going to just expound on their leadership and do what they need based on their school needs. And that would be one of the things that I know that we're very proud of from the principal and coaching and teaching level, and that was all grassroots. So there's a perfect example of how the coaching model truly works.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neal, and thank you again to the entire board for your work tonight. And Dr. Sear, thank you. You've answered a lot of questions, and we certainly appreciate your considered responses. And we promised at the beginning of this process, if time allowed, we would allow you the opportunity to ask questions of the board and to make a closing statement. And we do have time.
Wonderful. So you asked me the question, I'd like to ask the question back.
Sure.
And so, what do you see as some of the strongest needs in the district, and what would need to be addressed in the first 90 days of the superintendency position?
Mr. Buckaloo?
Thank you. I think there are a couple of things that we might point to. And then the first would be enrollment. We have to address enrollment. And obviously, enrollment has a tremendous impact on funding. I think we need to address achievement. You made a very important point that we have bright kids who don't score well on our tests. And that's a shame. If we could do something to better prepare those students for those achievements, I think, for those achievement tests, I think that we should go ahead and do that. And lastly, and this is out of our hands, at least directly out of our hands, but through advocating for Lansing to give us equity funding, I think that that's something that we have to do. Equal funding simply isn't going to get it, particularly in districts like yours and ours, where the socioeconomics of the community include a great deal of disadvantaged families. And those would be three things that I would think would be at the top of the list.
Thank you, Mr. Buckaloo. Ms. Hines?
Yes, I concur with my colleagues. I would also say test scores. That's very important because we have to, we only have so many years with our children, especially in high school level. So we have to make sure that they're ready to succeed. One thing I think is really important, we have a really awesome career tech. So I definitely want to make sure more children are utilizing that, the skill trades. I meet a lot of people in the community, and that's like really, really big to make sure we put them in front of the right people, like with career innovation, you know, making sure they can see it, because one minute a kid might want to do something, then once they see it, they change their mind, so that's very important. Enrollment is very important to make sure, because we have lost a lot of kids to the charter schools. And one thing I like about us being similar to Taylor, that we have the same experiences, the same demographics. We still, you know, we have the same kids, like we share the Inkster kids as well, so you guys understand how that works. Making sure we bring our teachers back. We have lost quite a bit of staff over the years. And we're going to be closing some schools pretty soon, so we need some help with that and just doing our realignments.
Mrs. Madell?
There's a lot of things that we need to tighten up on. We need to work hard and smart at the same time. A lot of it is having the ability to do all the things that we need to do, having the right people in the right seats on the right day, making the right decisions. And this is part of our process right now, is making sure that we have the right person in that chair, because we need to prioritize as a district. What is it? Of course we need more funding. Of course we need student achievement to go up. Of course we need more students. But the point is how, when, where. And that's what we need to do, is find ourselves that path, the quickest, the best, the most productive.
Thank you, Mrs. Walker.
Thank you. The biggest thing is when you first come in, you have to build relationships. You have to get to know the people that you will be working with from a day-to-day basis. You are coming into a family. You have to know your family members in order to make sure